The the Gemara that we learned yesterday, we basically went over. I did just want to mention that the last piece of the Gemara was about traveling on a Friday, and of course, it's not really connected to the uh, discussion of our chapter. Our chapter is about lulav and arava, but it was brought in because the names, the rabbis, are the rabbis um, who were talking in the previous two paragraphs. So the same rabbis mentioned this statement as well, Ivu in the name of Rebbe Lazar Bar Tzaddik. So this is the discussions of Ivu. These are three statements of Ivu. Ivu again was Rav's father, and so the last statement that he mentioned had to do with Shabbos, traveling on a Friday, and the concern, at least the way Rashi spells it out, is that we're nervous. Not only you might not have food, but if you travel on Friday and you arrive late in your house, you will actually be angry. You'll get angry at your family, and it won't be appropriate. Um, and so not only you're not going to have food for Shabbos, you're also going to have anger. And the Gemara says, therefore, there's a limit how much you can travel on a Friday. You got to arrive your destination early. And the Gemara had two opinions. Does that apply only to your house? Or if it applies to your house, for sure it applies anywhere else. Or maybe it only applies to your house and not if you're traveling other places, because maybe then you probably prepared food. So there were two versions in the Gemara itself. It mentioned both of these options. And then the Gemara mentions a story of Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana has a story where he arrived, seemingly came to his house. It doesn't say clearly if he came to his house or to a guest, to a place of, but he ended up he didn't have any food. So that story sort of like brings out this point even more, how important it is to be prepared for Shabbos, stop traveling at a certain point on the in the morning of Friday, so that you'll be able now to prepare for Shabbos. Now, the way this is brought in Shulchan Aruch is in chapter 249. It's brought in Shulchan Aruch, and Shulchan Aruch, both the Alter Rebbe and the regular Shulchan Aruch, they both bring this as a halakha. You can't travel more than 3 parsois, which we calculated yesterday to be 4 hours and 48 minutes. But we're talking about walking, so it's a certain, this is the distance, and it ends up being approximately that turns out to be the amount of time it takes to walk this distance, 3 parsois. And nowadays we go by miles or kilometers. In those days they went by parsois, or in Gemara's terminology, it's a parsa. Parsa is 4 mil. A mil is 2,000 amos cubits. Cubit is, of course, a debate what that is. But anyway, that's the bottom line is from the beginning of the day, you don't go more than that amount in order that you arrive at your destination when you still have a lot of time to prepare for Shabbos. And even if you're going to your house and the people might consider that you're going to arrive, so they might plan, but nevertheless, you're not allowed to arrive later than that, because maybe they didn't expect you, or maybe maybe it was a questionable if you were going to arrive, and therefore you shouldn't be traveling after this this later time in Friday morning. Now, if they know that you're going to arrive, then, like, for example, you sent an emissary to tell them your ETA, your arrival time, or you told them before you left, I am going to be back this Shabbos. You told them clearly, so then you would be allowed to travel all day on Friday. Now, then comes paragraph 2 in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, and the same thing is in the other Shulchan Aruch. It also mentions these ideas that this all applies when you're in a place where you can prepare the needs of Shabbos, or others will prepare for you. But if you're in a place that you can't prepare for Shabbos, so you're going to stop traveling, that's great. You're stopping, you're on the highway, you're stopping on the side of the road because you're not allowed to travel, and now you can't prepare anything for Shabbos. You're really fixing the problem. Sarcastically, you are not getting anywhere. You're stuck on the side of the road and you can't prepare for Shabbos anyway. So what are you going to do? Stop there? Does that help you? So now, and others can't even help you where you are. So better, you should continue traveling, even many parsois, many miles. Maybe you'll reach the place where you could prepare for, and others can prepare for you. Better that than staying on the side of the road where you don't have anything, and you're going to say, "Well, at least I have time to prepare." Yeah, you have time to prepare, but you don't have any way to prepare and any food to prepare. Now, what about if you have food with you? Even if you have food with you enough for Tzarchi Shabbos, nevertheless, if you're in a place that is not a populated area that's safe, so you're allowed to travel also because you need to be safe. If you're not safe, then you're not going to have Einig Shabbos. And then comes another qualification, but I see Mordechai wants to say something. Yes, Mordechai.
Yeah, when the Alter Rebbe was being led to prison by the Russians, he didn't even move to the side of the road when he decided it was time to stop for Shabbos.
Right. He told them you better stop, and everything started breaking. They finally
Right.
agreed. But I think he said they asked him, is it okay if we at least go to the side? I thought they said yes.
Right.
I thought he said yes, that we can go to the side, but that's it.
Right.
But I wonder when that was. Do you think that was 3 parsois? Interesting. I wonder if that was this calculation, or was it right before Shabbos? I have to look up that story. You wonder, was that Friday morning or was that Friday afternoon when he made them stop? Do you remember? That would be interesting if he's following this based on this. Anyway, bottom line is we now see one qualification is about being able to prepare where you are, and is it safe where you are? So that's one point. And another point is this is when you're walking, but if you're traveling on a wagon or on a horse, so then you can go much further. But nevertheless, in parentheses, the Alter Rebbe says, but you shouldn't travel more than the 3 parsois that it would take if you were walking. A regular person walks, which is 4 hours and 4/5 of an hour. Now, which basically means the 4 hours and 48 minutes rule. From, you shouldn't travel more than that. Then there's the final statement, and that is that in these countries where majority of people prepare abundantly for Shabbos, you don't have to worry about this halach at all. Because wherever you're going to go, there's not 2 pieces of kugel. There's a whole tray of kugel. There's not 2 pieces of chicken. There's a whole tray of chicken. There's not a little, half a bowl of cholent. There's 10 bowls of cholent. There's a big, huge pot of chicken soup. There's a whole roll of gefilte fish. There's a whole slab of salmon. So in these places where there's abundance, you don't have to worry that they're not going to have food. So these are all the qualifications to this halacha. The reason I'm mentioning this, in addition to the fact, so bottom line is it's not so applicable to halacha nowadays because we basically prepare abundantly. However, maybe it would apply if you were traveling and you're in an area where there aren't other Jewish people around and you didn't prepare yet for Shabbos. That could be an issue. If you're going and decided to take a trip to South Korea or some other place, I don't know, and there's no Jewish community around, and you're not, so you would have this issue. It does apply. It's just not often that these halachas would apply. Now, what bothered me was normally when we have a halacha, it normally is the rabbis said this halacha, you can't travel, and we don't see they made any qualification in the Gemara to this halacha. It seems like it's a straight out halacha. So how did the Shulchan Aruch come along and have these exceptions? I understand they're logical exceptions, but it would seem like the Gemara should have mentioned these. So another additional problem is, how did Rav Kahana, if you look in the final little statement there, was Rav Kahana said, I had this story happen to me and I didn't even have this any fish. I had no fish, not even little fish for Shabbos. I had nothing. How did Rav Kahana travel? I thought you're not allowed to. He didn't follow this halacha. What happened to Rav Kahana following this halacha? So this seems to be the answer to the first question. What do I mean? We see from the story of Rav Kahana that there are exceptions to this rule. The fact that Rav Kahana did this means that he didn't go against halacha. He was allowed to. Now, it ended up that he didn't even have kasa daharsna. He didn't even have fish for Shabbos. But it's not that he did something wrong. He obviously was allowed to travel. He was hoping to arrive somewhere where he would have had. So the story is brought to show you that there are exceptions to the rule. And that's why Rav Kahana did this, because he also was allowed. He was allowed to travel. So in other words, the story of Rav Kahana is showing you that there are exceptions to this rule. And that's why Shulchan Aruch, we find exceptions to this rule based on logic, because the fact that the Gemara itself doesn't say exceptions, doesn't have the exceptions, is not really correct. There is really in the Gemara an exception, and that is the story of Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana's story is the source, seemingly, that there are exceptions to this rule based on logical circumstances that you should be allowed to travel. You're not in a safe place. You have food prepared already. The family knows that you're arriving then for sure. It's not a question if you're arriving. All of these the exceptions that we saw in Shulchan Aruch are based on the fact that Rav Kahana's story. So that seems to be the explanation over here for these exceptions to the rule, these qualifications to the rule. And the final thing I just wanted to mention was also regarding Shemitah. We mentioned that because you're not fixing the trees and causing them to grow better, instead you were just minimizing or limiting. What just happened here? Is someone pressing a button? I think. Oh, maybe I'm. Something must have gone on top of my keyboard. Okay, so regarding Shemitah, so the Gemara had mentioned that there's two types of hoeing, and one type is permissible on Shemitah, the other type is prohibited. The Gemara talked about one type that causes the trees to grow better, that would be prohibited. The other type that's permitted is the stume pili. It's just closing off, covering up the holes, and this allows the roots of the tree to be covered, and the tree won't dry out, and it'll be okay. It'll last. You're not going to ruin it. In other words, you're causing the tree not to be ruined, but you're not enhancing its growth. So that was permissible. The thing is, the Gemara in Mein Katan talks about a machlokes, if you're allowed to, what type of work would be allowed on or what the prohibitions are, I should say, on Shemitah. And certain things are prohibited biblically and other things are prohibited rabbinically. Now, things that are prohibited rabbinically often have exceptions. Like, for example, if it's going to cause a damage, the rabbis said their rule in this scenario, but they didn't say their rule in another scenario. So if you learn that this type of hoeing is only rabbinic, then we understand the rabbis made their rule when it was applicable, regarding enhancing the growth of the tree, but they did not say their rule. They did not make their decree when it's not enhancing the tree, and it's just, it's a rabbinic decree. The rabbis have the right to decide when they're going to state their decree. However, if you learn that it's biblical, so normally biblical laws don't really have these options of saying, well, hoeing, if you're doing it for this purpose, we're going to allow it. So how does that opinion learn this Gemara, this story, if you hold, again, it's a machlekes Rava and Abaye, and according to Rava, it's only rabbinic, so that's understandable. According to Abaye, it seems problematic because hoeing would be biblical. Seemingly, it would be biblical. How would that be permissible, even though you're not enhancing the tree? So the commentaries mention that even that in this that the laws of work on Shemitah, they actually are based on enhancing the tree, and this is a scenario where we sort of have a not just the law not to do work, but the whole meaning of work by Shemitah is different meaning maybe than the laws of Shabbos and other laws of work. And by Shemitah, the laws of work, the work that's prohibited, are only work that's mishabeach the tree, that enhances the tree, and other types of work is not included in the biblical command. In other words, this is unique in a certain sense, because normally we would say, you're not allowed to hoe, you're not allowed to hoe. But here, the laws of, it must be hinted to in a pasuk, the commentaries mention this, and as they ask this question, and they explain that the laws of Shemitah, laws, even the biblical laws, somehow are all connected to being Meshabeach, the tree. This is connected to the tractate Moed Katan. So, Mitzvah Hashem, when we learn Moed Katan, maybe we'll understand exactly what it's based on, where we see that the laws, even the biblical laws there, are all connected to being enhancing the tree. But that's basically, even according to Abaye, even if you hold it's biblical, this would have been permitted. And that's what the Gemara concludes here, that was not an issue with this story. The only issue was that he was paying them with the olives, and that was a Marisayan problem. That looked bad, at least according to one of the commentaries, the way they explain it, that the issue was more of a Marisayan. It looked like he was doing something wrong when he was paying by the fact that they were taking the olives as payment. Yes, Jeffrey.
I was very interested in that word makashkeshin because it's based on the word for straw. And it seems to me that they're talking about rocks when in the commentary. So
well, milakashkesh and milasakil, two separate things.
The second one was rocks.
There's milasakil, that's rocks.
Right.
And makashkesh, you're right. It does sound like the story in the Chumash with he was gathering straw.
Exactly. Right.
Although there's different commentaries what that means, what exactly he was doing, even that story. But yes, I'll use that word.
So I think it looked to me like the people came themselves because his field was hefker. It really was hefker. The people came themselves, but this particular group of people were used to doing this every year. They were coming to his fields because of the olives, and in order to get to the olives, apparently there was a lot of stubble left in the field around it. And so you really had to make a way for it to be more convenient to collect the olives properly. And so they were coming of their own accord because it was hefker. So he wasn't breaking that law.
Right.
But then they maybe didn't understand as much as he understood. And they came and they took the olives, not because they were doing the makashkeshin, but they were makashkeshin in order to be able to get to the olives.
Get the olives.
Yeah.
That's a very nice explanation. This is your own thought. This is very nice.
Yes.
Very nice. Now, Rashi. Yesterday, I mentioned I was a little bothered that was struggling to understand how to understand Rashi. In other words, what did Rashi mean Rashi said, Ochli Zeisaya, Ochli Zeisaya, Rashi said, Bischar Chafiras Hakramim, Ve'enon Mafkirin La'aniyim, or Mufkirin,
Yeah,
Mafkirin La'aniyim.
right.
Rashi uses the term that they are not hefker. And that bothered me because we're trying to explain that this guy was a holy guy. He might not have known about the Marasayan issue, but the halachas he seemed to be pretty good on. And when he heard that there's a Marasayan problem, he rushed to fix it. And so when Reb Elazar Reb Tzadok compliments him and
That's
gives
quite
him
quite substantially.
yeah. But the fact that but how could he have not been mafkir to the aniyim? That sounded surprising, unless you want to learn that it was that not that he wasn't mafkir it to the aniyim. The fact that they ate it made it seem like it wasn't hefker to the aniyim because they were the ones who got to it. So I guess the way you want to learn that as well is not that it wasn't hefker, it's just it was hard for them to get to. In other words, according to your explanation, it actually adds a little spice to this. It was like impossible for people to get to. So it wasn't exactly hefker la'aniyim. It wasn't exactly ownerless because they could never get to it. So they were eating those olives because and that was like their payment, and those olives were not accessible in a certain sense.
But the other thing that's funny is because they say eating them, like you quoted the Torah the other day, but they don't sit there and eat them. So it also one of the problems is that it's as if they were gathering them.
Right. Okay.
They're just,
they weren't just picking a few and eating it. They were taking home. Yeah.
Yeah. But you're allowed to take
right.
6 meals and go home from the field that's hefker.
No, that's not an issue.
Yeah. So, but maybe also they had tools, whatever. And so even if it's hefker, that the poor people wouldn't necessarily have the
right.
The
they didn't have access. They didn't have access. These people had access because they had the tools. Right. No, I hear you. Beautiful. Very nice shot. I like it. You could write it up. Very nice. Good insight. Okay. We are now on the next Gemara. We are right at the bottom of the page of 44b. 44b, mitzvahs lulav ketzad. And this is taking us back to the Mishnah. And the Mishnah had mentioned that this was on 42b, the Mishnah. It said, what is the mitzvah of, where are we? Mitzvahs lulav ketzad. It was like halfway down that Mishnah. It said, what is the mitzvah of lulav? On Shabbos, Yom Tov Rishon Shel Chag, the first day of Sukkot falls on Shabbos. They would bring their lulav to Har HaBayis, and the mountain where the Beis Hamikdash was. And like the Gabayim would receive their lulav and set it up on top of the itztava, on top of these type of benches, and the elders would put the elders would have a special place where their lulavim were, and it was in some type of a lishka, some type of room. And people would not get their lulav back. They would get someone else's, and they would make sure that everyone would acknowledge and agree that, well, I'm not getting mine back. I am giving it as a matana, matana. I'm giving it as a gift for the other person to fulfill the mitzvah. And then the next day, they would basically throw the lulavim to each other, and everyone would grab their lulav. And, what happened when Bezdin saw sakana was dangerous, so they made a decree that, what happens on Shabbos? Shake your lulav in your house. Don't bring it to the Beis Hamikdash. That was the conclusion of that Mishnah. Nowadays, we do not do the lulav on Shabbos, but there was a time when it was done on Shabbos, and even in the Beis Hamikdash, they would instead do it in their house. There was a time when it was done in the Beis Hamikdash, and then there was a time when it was, the Bezdin said, no, let's just do it in your house when it falls on Shabbos. So comes the Gemara and says, Mitzvahs lulav ketzad. So what is the mitzvah of lulav? And that was the Mishnah. Tani Tama Tana Kamei Rav Nachman. A Tana came in front of Rav Nachman, and he was repeating this Mishnah. Soidrin al Gag Ho'itztava. And he said they would set the lulavim on the roof, on top of the benches. There was some type of roofing on top of these benches. And they would set the lulavim on top of these benches. Now, if you think about it, the word Gag and the word Gav are very similar. Gag means roof, and al-Gav means on top of, or, maybe the back of, literally could mean the back. A person's back is the Gav, but it could also just mean on top of. So Gag could mean roof or it could mean on top. So he was reciting this Mishnah, and he said they would set them on the Gag of the Yitzchok, on the roof of the bench. Amar Lei, so Rav Nachman told him, he says, oh, you want to put these lulavim on the roof? You're trying to dry them out? That's not exactly ideal for a lulav, and for the hadassim and aravas, it's going to ruin them. So he says, you want to dry. Ela ema al gav. Rather, you should say, don't say al gag, but say al gav. And you put them on top of the benches. That was the where they would stick them, but not al gag, not on a roof. And the Gemara says, Amar Rachava or Rachva, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Harabayas Stav Kaful Haya. Rabbi Yehuda, Rachva says in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, Harabayas were rows of benches doubled. And basically it was the whole perimeter of the mountain. They were the Harabayas was Stav Kaful, was double benches, and it was surrounded by these benches, and Stav Lefnim Stav, one row inside another row. And that there were basically sufficient, I guess, benches for them to pile up the lulavim on top of these benches for everyone to use, until it became a sakana, and they ended up prohibiting people to bring their lulavim to the Beis Hamikdash, and people would just they would just bench lulav on Shabbos in their house. Okay, now comes the next Mishnah. We are on page 45a, and we are learning the next Mishnah. The Mishnah here is talking about Arava, the mitzvah of Arava. Now, of course, we've talked about the Aravas in the lulav, and now we're talking about the Arava of its, on its own, the special Arava mitzvah, the mitzvah of Arava. Now, the Mishnah says, mitzvahs Arava ketzad. How is this mitzvah of Arava fulfilled? Again, we're not talking about the Arava that's in the lulav. That's part of the 4 species. Here we're talking about the mitzvah of Arava. How was it done? Makoim haya lamatam Yerushalayim b'nikra Moitza. There was a place below Yerushalayim, and it was called Moitza. Yardin l'sham. They would go down there. Emissaries would go down there. Umalaktin misham murbiyos shel Arava. They would gather long, beautiful branches of Arava, and uboyin v'zoikvin oisan, and they would come and stand them betzidei hamizbeach, on the side of the mizbeach, v'roshehen, and their tips, their tops, kufufin al gabe hamizbeach, would be bent over on top of the mizbeach, and taku v'hariyu v'taku, they would blow the shofar, and with tekiah, or the trumpets, with tekiah, with teruah, and tekiah. So Taisus over here mentions that they would blow. He says mishum simcha, part of the mitzvah of rejoicing. That's what they would They would rejoice by blowing. Blowing was like a almost like a persume nisa type of thing, and they would make this announce. They would blow. It was a joyous occasion. Um, now. Now the Mishnah continues. B'chol yoim makifen es hamizbeach pa'amachas. Every day they would surround the mizbeach. They would go around the mizbeach once, and and they would say, "Ona Hashem Hoshiana, Ona Hashem Hatzlichana." They would say the pasuk in Hallel, "Ona Hashem Hoshiana, Ona Hashem Hatzlichana." Please Hashem save us. Please Hashem make us successful. And Rabbi Yehuda says that they would say the same gematria of it, but they would say a little differently. They would say Ani v'hoy hoishiana. V'oisay hayoim, on that day, that was Hoshana Rabba, Makifen Esamizbeach Sheva Pa'amim. They would go around the Mizbeach 7 times. What's the concept of 7 times? So it brought in Yerushalmi that it was similar to, there was a commemoration for Yerichai. The Yerichai, how did they conquer Yerichai, Jericho? They went around the city, the wall of the city 7 times, and the wall collapsed. It sunk. And so the same thing, that this is a commemoration, so we commemorate that, and we go around the Mizbeach 7 times. So 6 days, and the truth is that's what they did then as well. They went six days in a row, and then the 7th day they surrounded it 7 times, and it fell, and and that's the story in the book of Yehoshua. That's the so that's what it mentions in Yerushalmi. What's the connection between going around the Mizbeach and the 7 times? It's unclear exactly what, how to develop that idea, but the concept is in Yerushalmi, and it's some type of a commemoration. The 7 times around the Mizbeach is commemorates that concept. And so basically, for 6 days we go around the Mizbeach now what did they go around the Mizbeach with? It says b'chol yoim, every day they would go around the Mizbeach 1 time, and they would say this either Ana Hashem Hashiana or Ana Ani v'hoy Hashiana. But what did they go around the Mizbeach with? So we had an argument earlier in the Gemara if it was with holding the Aravais or if it was holding the Lulav and Esrog. That was a machlekes previously on previous daf. If the Amoraim argued, was it with the Lavim or the Aravais? Nowadays, of course, we go around the Bima with our Lulav and Esrog. We don't go around the Bima with the Arava. Okay. Now, Bishas Pitiros, I should mention before that the Rashi over here, there's a long Rashi over here that talks about a Kabbalistic idea. He says, what's this whole idea of Ani V'hoy Hoshiana? So he says, Ani V'hoy Hoshiana is an interesting way of connecting the name, Hashem's name, of 72 letters, which is learned from, there's 3 psukim in the in Parshas Bishalach that have 72 they have 72 letters, and that's connected to the name of Hashem that has 72 letters. And These three psukim are right next to each other. Vayisa, Vayavoy, Vayet. They all have 72 letters, and in that is Hashem's hidden name. So we somehow commemorate Hashem. We mention it by these letters. What are the letters? What are the few letters that we're choosing? How is that connected to these 72 letter name of Hashem and 72 letters of these psukim? We take the first letter of the first pasuk, the last letter of the second pasuk, and the first letter of the third pasuk, and we have this ani v'hoy. What does that mean? So Rashi goes through it. He says the first letter of the first pasuk. Vayisa, so that's a vav, and the last letter of the second pasuk is a hey, and the first letter of the third pasuk vayet is a vav, so it's vav hey vav, and you have vahoy, and then if you do if you divide these psukim in half, basically, each one is 36. So you take you also get the aleph ani. So you have the aleph from the word me'acharehem. That's the 37th letter. Then you have the 37th letter from going backwards is a nun from the word ha'anon. And then you have the 37th letter going forward of the third pasuk is a yud of ruach kodim, the yud in kodim. So you have ani v'hoy. So it's a little kabbalistic idea that you have you're mentioning Hashem's name. The reason why Rabbi Yehuda says you're supposed to say ani v'hoy is because what it's connecting the name of Hashem, the hidden name of Hashem, with this ceremony of the Arabis. So that's so number one, ani v'hoy is the same as like Ana Hashem, and you can Ana Hashem. Just think about it. Ana Hashem, Hashem is Yud Kei Vav Kei is 26, and Ana is 52. And if you do ani v'hoy instead of Ana, it's so you just
ani 52. That's also for.
Well, you would have Yud Kei Vav Kei. If you take the ani v'hoy, you really take the yud from Yud Kei Vav Kei from Hashem, and instead you put it onto the yud, add to the word Ana, so you have ani and then v'hoy Yud Kei Vav Kei. But here instead of Vav Kei, it's a Vav Vav, because you need to add another aleph. It comes to the same gematria, the same numerical value. So basically, you have two elements to explain Rabbi Yehuda. Rashi brings these two ideas. Number one is that it's gematria, and it's from the 72-letter name of Hashem. Okay, b'shas piti rason, when they would leave from the mizbeach on the 7th day of when they would finish this ceremony on Hoshana Rabbah, when they would be leaving so Mahain Oimrim, what would they say? Yoifi l'cha mizbeach, Yoifi l'cha mizbeach. We are doing this beautification for you, mizbeach. Yoifi l'cha, we are doing this beautification to you, mizbeach, because you are atoning for us. So we are doing this beautification for you. That is the wording. Now, kamasehu b'choil kach masehu b'Shabbos. The same thing they would do during the week, that's what they would do on Shabbos. If it fell on Shabbos, it would be the same thing. As we said, that the mitzvahs arava, it doicha Shabbos, it overrides Shabbos if Shabbos falls on the 7th day on Hoshana Rabbah. The other days it wouldn't, but if it falls on Hoshana Rabbah, it overrides Shabbos. And nowadays in our calendar, it cannot fall on Shabbos. But if it did, you would, at least according to the Mishnah, it would, or in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, it would override Shabbos. They would do this ceremony. Now, the Gemara says, Ella, but Shahayu Malaktin son may Erev, they would harvest these branches from before Shabbat. Umanichan son begigi shel zahav, and they would put them in these barrels of gold that were filled with water, in order that they should not dry out. The leaves shouldn't dry out, as you know, that the aravis leaves, the willow leaves dry out very easily. And so if they weren't doing it during the week, they would have to cut it before Shabbos. If it was during the week, they could do it right there, right before they do the ceremony. But here they needed to do it the day before. So they would get into these golden, they would stick it into these golden barrels. Okay. Rabbi Yochanan ben Breika argues, and he says, they would bring branches of a palm tree, whether it was weekday or Shabbos. They did not bring aravos. They would bring palm branches, or at least the discussion if they would also bring palm branches or not. We'll see in the Gemara. But different commentaries understand it. And we'll see how the Gemara, different commentaries in the Gemara, how they explain it. But basically, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Breika, it was either not only aravos or it was not aravos at all. It wasn't willows. It was these palm branches. And v'chayften oisan bekarka b'tzidei hamizbeach, and they would bang it into the ground on the side or on the side of the mizbeach. V'oisay hayoim nikra chibot, yom chibot chariyos. That day was called the day of chibot chariyos, and the day that they would do this. Chariyos are the branches of a palm tree, not willow branches. That's chariyos. So according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Breika, there was something to do with these palm branches, not or not only willows or not willows. And it even had a term. There was even a term for this seventh day of Sukkot, was the day that they would do this ceremony with the chariyos, with these branches of the palm branches. Okay. The Mishnah.
We skipped something.
What?
I think we skipped something. It says, "B'shas Mahen Omrim."
I skipped the line. Oh, you're right. I'm sorry.
Eliezer?
Yes, thank you. Okay, yeah, you're right. I skipped the line. I'm sorry.
So is this Rabbi Eliezer?
Rabbi Eliezer Eimer. Rabbi Eliezer says, yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know how I skipped that. Rabbi Eliezer Eimer, Rabbi Eliezer says, L'ka u'lecha mizbeach, l'ka u'lecha mizbeach. To Hashem and to you, the mizbeach, we are doing this honor to you and to the to Hashem and to the mizbeach. We'll see in the Gemara how the Gemara deals with that. It sounds a little strange to include Hashem and the mizbeach together, but that's the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Now we will continue the final statement in the Gemara in the Mishnah. Miyad tinoikos shomtin es lulavein. The way Rashi learns this, from the hands of the children, they would slip out the lulavs, va'oichlin esregayim, and they would eat the esregim of the children. And it wasn't a problem of gezel, of stealing, or not acting in proper decor, proper ways, because they did this out of a simcha, out of joy. That's the way Rashi learned. So the older people would sort of like play this game where they would slip the lulavim away from the children, and then and they would eat the esrogim. Sounds interesting, but that was done out of joy. I'm not exactly sure what, it seemed like a little like game almost. Almost like people do on Pesach, where they hide the Afikaiman and they make a little game out of it. So there's they would do a similar type of thing on Sukkot, the end of Sukkot. Tues brings a whole interesting thing that there's they used to do things similar to this by a chassan. The Bachrim would ride on horses towards the chassan, and they would sort of like make a little fight with each other, and people's clothing sometimes got ripped, or their horse got damaged, and they would be exempt because it was done as simchas chassan. And then Taisa says that there's another way of reading the Mishnah, that it doesn't mean from the hands of the tinoikos, from the hands of the children, they would slip out the lulav, but it means right away, miyad, right away, the children would take their lulavim from they would slip out the lulav from the arava, because the lulav was longer, and they would play with it, and the esrogayim they would eat. And that's another way of reading the Mishnah, that it has nothing to do with stealing here. It has to do with the fact that the children would now use they would sort of like play with the lulav, and they would eat the esrog. Anyway, we'll have to see in the Gemara how that
he introduces the word chotef that we talk about, we use with on Pesach, about that we talk about the matzah.
Wait, shaimtim. Which word chaytiv?
No, Iri kalal sheyichtafu hagdoli miyadan shel tinokos. Chotfin. You see, he changes the word from chibut. It's like he's making a pun of the word of chibut.
I don't know if he switches the word. He just says that don't think that this was don't use the word chaytvin, use the word shaimtim. In other words, it's literal shaimtim. Not, in other words, the earlier translation explained shaimtim to mean chaytvin, and the way he says is no, we're not talking about chaytvin. We're not talking about stealing it or slipping or like taking it. They're talking about slipping it out. It's literal. Shaimtim means shaimtim, but not that he's switching the word. I don't see.
Okay.
See,
yeah, I don't think it's in this context. It looks to me a lot of this is wordplay. Before also, okay.
Well, you know what it is. It's where to put the comma. Miyad, comma, immediately. Or is it miyad tinoikos, comma, right, from the hands of the tinoikos, sort of like shemtim es lulaveim? You know, it's a question of how to read it, ultimately how to translate it. Yeah.
So it looks like they're taking apart the lulav. That's what it looks like. They finished the 7th March. It's the end of the cycle of the holiday, and they took apart the lulav, and so they eat the esrogim and they play with the other things. There's people also at the Seder. They play with scallions, things like this. In other words, it's been a long holiday season, and the people have been very serious, and they had to do a lot of different activities besides building the sukkah. And so they come to the end, so that everybody sort of like releases themselves.
That's one way of thinking about it. I thought about it as more of but the reason I think it's done by Pesach is more of like engaging the children and getting them connected. So here also, the way I understood it, at least when I learned it, was we want the children to be entertained and connected to the holiday, so they look forward to this part of it, where they're where it's sort of like Simcha, or maybe the adults even, because I guess the adults were the ones who were slipping it away, and the children, seems like the adults. Yeah, I don't know. There's more Simcha. It's like the problem I have is, what type of joy is that for adults to go like sneak it away? Is that so joyous? Like I can't relate to it exactly.
And we just had the word we just discussed by Rav Kahana. Just before that, we used the word, we talked about Tishmetena and Tashta, right? About the 7th year, right? That's the word in the Torah, and it doesn't mean the same thing. Okay. And if you look, we read the Haftarah this week also, has the same word in it. The wagon that the Aron HaKodesh was on was being pulled by oxen.
Don't do HaBakar, right? The Bakar, yeah. Anyway, interesting. Yeah, it's interesting about the words. Okay. Anyway, Dr. Gemara. We're going to continue now with the Gemara. Tana, it was taught in a Tosefta. Makoim Kolonya. The place was a place where they were exempt from taxes. They didn't have to pay taxes in that place. That was where they got these aravis from. Now, our Tana said it was from a place called Meitzah. The Tana Didan, my Tana correlate Meitzah. Why did our Tana call it a place called Meitzah? So the Gemara answers, Id de Mepak Mikraga de Malka, since he's goes out of paying taxes from the king, correlate Meitzah, it's called Meitzah. Meitzah means to go out. It's removed. It's exempt from paying the tax. So it's called Meitzah. Basically, it's a similar term to Kolonya. But Kolonya probably is Aramaic, I'm guessing.